Jeffrey Matthews stood frozen at his office door, staring at the small figure sitting confidently in his executive chair. The child couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with bright blue eyes, an unruly mop of blonde hair, and tiny feet dangling well above the floor. The boy wore a miniature suit that appeared to have been tailored specifically for him, complete with a red power tie and what looked like custom-made Italian leather shoes. "Excuse me," Jeffrey said, checking the door to confirm he'd entered the correct office. "Who are you, and why are you sitting in my chair?" The boy swiveled to face him, hands steepled in perfect imitation of a seasoned executive. "Mr. Matthews, I presume. I'm Oliver Hayes. I'm here for the CEO interview." The child's voice was high-pitched, but surprisingly articulate. "And I'm here to save your company." Jeffrey almost laughed, but something in the boy's unwavering gaze made him pause. This had to be some elaborate prank staged by his executive team. TechFusion had been struggling for months, their stock price plummeting after a disastrous product launch and mounting competition from overseas. Jeffrey had reluctantly announced his resignation last week, and the board was interviewing candidates to replace him. "Listen, kid, I don't know how you got in here, but your security protocols are outdated," Oliver interrupted, sliding from the chair and picking up a small briefcase from the floor. "I simply told Ms. Reynolds at reception that I was the son of one of the board members who forgot his lunch. She didn't even verify with a call. That's your first problem." Jeffrey felt a strange chill run down his spine. No one was supposed to know that board member William Hayes often forgot his meals. It was an inside joke among senior management. "My name is Theo Teller, and if this introduction has already sparked your curiosity, leave a like to follow the unfolding of this extraordinary journey. Which city are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments below." "How did you know about Hayes?" Jeffrey asked, closing the door behind him. Oliver smiled. "Research, Mr. Matthews. The foundation of any successful business strategy." He opened his briefcase and removed a tablet. "I've prepared a comprehensive analysis of TechFusion's current market position and identified 3 critical failure points in your business model." Jeffrey's curiosity got the better of him. He sat in one of the client chairs across from his desk. "Okay, Oliver, I'll play along. What are these critical failure points?" The boy tapped his tablet and suddenly the large screen on Jeffrey's wall came to life, displaying a detailed presentation. "First, your flagship product, the Fusion X, has fundamental design flaws that were never addressed before launch. Second, your research and development department has become stagnant, with 78% of resources allocated to improving existing products rather than innovation. And third," the boy paused dramatically, "your corporate culture has deteriorated into a toxic environment where good ideas die because middle management fears change." Jeffrey felt the blood drain from his face. The child had just summarized with remarkable precision the exact assessment he had privately shared with the board last month. That document was confidential and had only been viewed by 7 people, all of whom had signed NDAs. "Who are you, really?" Jeffrey demanded, his amusement completely gone. "Who put you up to this?" Oliver ignored the question and continued, "Your competitors at Nextech have already developed a superior version of the Fusion X. They plan to announce it next quarter." He swiped to another slide, showing proprietary designs that looked disturbingly similar to Nextech's rumored new product. "This is impossible," Jeffrey whispered, staring at schematics he'd never seen before. "How did you get this information?" The boy shrugged. "Adults underestimate children, Mr. Matthews. We can go places, hear things, and access information without raising suspicion, but that's not important right now." He switched off the presentation and looked directly at Jeffrey. "What's important is that TechFusion is 6 months away from bankruptcy unless drastic changes are made." Outside the office window, rain began to fall on the New York skyline, creating a somber backdrop to this bizarre encounter. Jeffrey Matthews, who had navigated economic downturns, hostile takeovers, and countless corporate crises during his 20-year career, found himself speechless before a kindergartner. "What do you want?" he finally asked. Oliver's serious expression softened into a smile that suddenly reminded Jeffrey how young the boy truly was. "I want to help. And I think you're going to want to hear what I have to say next." Jeffrey Matthews poured himself a strong black coffee from the executive bar in the corner of his office, trying to process the surreal situation. The rain continued to pelt against the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a rhythmic backdrop to his scattered thoughts. "Let me get this straight," he said, returning to his seat across from Oliver. "You're 6 years old." 6 3/4, Oliver corrected, opening a juice box he'd retrieved from his briefcase. 6 3/4, Jeffrey conceded. "And you've somehow obtained confidential corporate information, created a detailed analysis of my company's problems, and now you want to—" "What exactly?" "Become our CEO." Oliver took a careful sip through his straw. "Not immediately. That would raise too many regulatory questions. I'm proposing a consulting arrangement where I advise you privately for 3 months. If my strategies work, we can discuss a more formal position later." Jeffrey ran a hand through his graying hair. 20 minutes ago, his biggest concern had been how to gracefully exit a company he'd helped build from the ground up. Now he was negotiating with a child who shouldn't even have mastered long division yet. "This is absurd," Jeffrey muttered, but couldn't help adding, "What makes you think you can save TechFusion when an entire team of experienced executives couldn't?" Oliver set down his juice box and leaned forward. "Because I understand something your executives don't. The future doesn't belong to them. It belongs to my generation. We're the ones who will use your technology, shape the markets, and determine which companies survive." His blue eyes seemed to grow more intense. "Your team keeps designing products for people like you, not for people like me." The statement hit Jeffrey like a physical blow. It was true. TechFusion's recent product launches had received tepid responses from younger consumers who increasingly viewed the brand as outdated and irrelevant. "Can I ask you something personal, Oliver?" Jeffrey said, studying the boy carefully. Oliver nodded. "Where are your parents? Do they know you're here?" A shadow crossed the child's face, so brief Jeffrey almost missed it. "My father is occupied with more important matters. My mother left when I was 3. He straightened his small tie. "But my caretaker, Miss Sullivan, believes I'm at a museum field trip today. She'll collect me at 3 p.m. from the Museum of Natural History." The casual way Oliver mentioned his broken home life made Jeffrey's heart constrict unexpectedly. Despite the bizarre circumstances, he felt a surprising flash of protectiveness toward the boy. "That doesn't answer how you learned about corporate strategy or financial analysis," Jeffrey pressed. Oliver's expression became guarded. "Let's just say, when you're often alone in a large house with an extensive library and unlimited internet access, you find ways to educate yourselves." He glanced at his watch, an expensive-looking timepiece that seemed comically large on his small wrist. "We're wasting valuable time, Mr. Matthews. Your board meeting is in 3 hours, and you currently have nothing to present that will save your position." Jeffrey felt a chill. How did the boy know about today's emergency board meeting? "I don't mean to alarm you," Oliver continued, "but board member Elizabeth Jennings has already approached Nextech's CEO about a potential acquisition. The offer is substantially below market value, and if it proceeds, 40% of your workforce will be terminated." Jeffrey's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. "That's not possible. Elizabeth has been my ally for years." "Allegiances change," Oliver said simply, "especially when personal interests are involved. Did you know her son was recently hired at Nextech as a senior vice president?" The revelation hit Jeffrey like a thunderbolt. Elizabeth had mentioned her son's new job, but had been deliberately vague about where he'd been hired. The potential conflict of interest was glaring. Jeffrey set down his cup with a shaking hand. "Even if what you're saying is true, what can we possibly do before the board meeting?" Oliver smiled and tapped his tablet again. The wall screen displayed a new presentation. I've prepared an alternative strategy. It leverages TechFusion's strongest assets while addressing the critical flaws in your business model. He swiped through detailed slides showing market analyses, financial projections, and product roadmaps. The centerpiece is a complete redesign of the Fusion X, incorporating features that directly address the needs of users under 25. Despite his skepticism, Jeffrey found himself impressed by the thoroughness of the presentation. The strategy was bold but grounded in sound business principles. Some of the product concepts were genuinely innovative, features Jeffrey's team had never considered, but seemed obvious once presented. "This is actually quite good," he admitted reluctantly. "But the board will never listen to a child, and if I present these ideas as my own, they'll want to know where they came from." Oliver closed his tablet. "You underestimate how desperately they want solutions, Mr. Matthews. They don't care where the ideas come from, as long as they work." He paused, studying Jeffrey with an unnerving intensity. "The question is, do you care more about saving your pride or saving your company?" Outside, a crack of thunder punctuated Oliver's question. For the first time in years, Jeffrey felt something shift inside him, a rekindling of the passion and purpose that had driven him in TechFusion's early days, before shareholder pressure and market competition had reduced everything to quarterly numbers. "Why are you really doing this, Oliver?" Jeffrey asked softly. "What's in it for you?" The boy looked away, a momentary vulnerability showing through his precocious facade. "Let's just say I have my reasons," he replied, his voice suddenly sounding much more like the child he actually was. The next hour passed in a flurry of activity as Jeffrey and Oliver refined the presentation for the board meeting. Jeffrey was astonished by the depth of the boy's knowledge, not just about technology and market trends, but about the personalities and priorities of each board member. "Jenkins always responds to safety features," Oliver explained as they worked. "His daughter had a car accident last year, so emphasize the enhanced security protocols in the new design." Jeffrey paused from typing notes. "How could you possibly know that about Jenkins? That accident was never reported in the press." Oliver shrugged. "People talk around children as if we're invisible. His assistant mentioned it to your HR director during the company picnic last summer." He turned back to the presentation. "Also, highlight the sustainability aspects for Dr. Patel. She's passionate about environmental causes and sits on the board of 3 conservation groups." Jeffrey felt increasingly unsettled. The boy seemed to know intimate details about people he should never have encountered. Yet everything he said checked out against Jeffrey's own knowledge. "Oliver," Jeffrey said carefully, "I need you to be honest with me. Are you some kind of corporate spy? Is someone feeding you this information?" The boy looked genuinely offended. "I'm not a spy, Mr. Matthews. I'm someone who sees patterns others miss." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "And I have a personal interest in TechFusion's success." Before Jeffrey could press further, his phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. "Board members arriving early. Meeting moved up to 1 p.m. Jeffrey checked his watch. It was already 12:30. "We're out of time. The board's arriving in 30 minutes. Oliver nodded calmly. "That's actually better. They'll have less time to form counter-arguments." He began packing up his tablet. "I'll leave you with the final presentation. You can handle it from here." "Wait," Jeffrey said, surprised by the boy's sudden departure. "You're leaving? After all this prep work?" "Adults rarely take advice from children, Mr. Matthews. The ideas need to come from you to be credible." Oliver handed him a USB drive. "Everything is on here, including responses to the 20 most likely objections from the board. Focus particularly on questions from Jenkins about cost and from Elizabeth about timeline. She'll try to delay any new initiatives to strengthen Nextech's position." Jeffrey took the drive, feeling strangely reluctant to see the boy go. "What if I have questions? How do I reach you?" "You won't need to," Oliver said confidently. "Trust yourself. You founded this company because you had vision. You've just lost sight of it temporarily." He headed toward the door, his small briefcase bumping against his leg. Jeffrey followed him. At least tell me how you got past building security. I need to fix that vulnerability. Oliver paused at the door, a mischievous smile playing across his face. Check the visitor log. I signed in properly as Oliver Hayes, son of William Hayes. No one questioned it because no one bothers to verify what they assume to be true. He straightened his little tie. That's another business lesson for you, Mr. Matthews. Question your assumptions. As the boy reached for the door handle, Jeffrey noticed something that stopped him cold. Oliver's expensive watch had shifted, revealing a small birthmark on his wrist, a distinctive crescent shape that Jeffrey had seen before. That birthmark, Jeffrey said slowly. I've only seen that mark on one other person. Oliver froze, his small hand still on the door handle. William Hayes has that exact same birthmark, Jeffrey continued, pieces suddenly falling into place. He mentioned once it's hereditary. Every Hayes has had it for generations. The boy's shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. William never mentioned having a son, Jeffrey said. He has 2 daughters in college, but no son. At least not one he's acknowledged. The rain outside had stopped, and sunlight now streamed through the windows, illuminating the small figure by the door. Oliver finally turned, his composure slipping for the first time. William Hayes has 3 children, the boy said quietly, but he only claims 2 of them. Jeffrey felt his heart constrict. William Hayes, his longtime friend and business partner, was one of the wealthiest men in the country, but also notoriously private about his personal life. There had been rumors years ago about an affair with his executive assistant, who had abruptly left the company. The timing would match with Oliver's age. Does he know you're here today? Jeffrey asked gently. Oliver's chin lifted in a gesture of defiance, but Jeffrey could see the hurt in his eyes. He knows I exist. He pays for my education, my caretaker, everything really. But he's never once come to see me. The boy's voice remained controlled, but his small hands had balled into fists. He's on the board of a company that creates the future, but he can't even acknowledge his own son. The revelation hung heavy in the air between them. Jeffrey suddenly understood Oliver's motivation. This wasn't just about saving TechFusion. It was a son's desperate attempt to prove his worth to an absent father. That's why you know so much about the company, Jeffrey said softly. You've been studying it because it's the only connection I have to him, Oliver finished, his professional facade crumbling further to reveal the wounded child beneath. I thought if I could save his company, maybe he'd finally... The boy didn't complete the sentence, but he didn't need to. Jeffrey understood the unspoken hope. Maybe he'd finally love me. Maybe he'd finally be proud. Maybe he'd finally acknowledge me. Jeffrey knelt down to eye level with the child. Oliver, what you've done today is remarkable, truly, but you shouldn't have to prove your worth to anyone, especially not to a father who hasn't earned the right to your brilliance. Something shifted in Oliver's expression, a vulnerability that made him look his actual age for the first time since Jeffrey had found him sitting in the executive chair. For a brief moment, Jeffrey could see past the precocious business prodigy to the lonely little boy beneath. He'll be at the board meeting, Oliver said quietly. He never even looks at me when we accidentally cross paths, but he'll be hanging on your every word in there. Jeffrey felt a surge of protective anger on behalf of the child before him. The injustice of William Hayes, a man who preached corporate responsibility and family values in public, secretly abandoning his own son, was staggering. All the years Jeffrey had respected and admired William suddenly felt hollow. Oliver, Jeffrey said carefully, I'm going to present your ideas to the board. They're brilliant, and they might save this company, but I want to give you credit for them. Alarm flashed across the boy's face. No! You can't tell them about me. My father would... Your father would what? Jeffrey pressed gently. Oliver looked down at his polished shoes. He would make sure I never came near TechFusion again. He's made it very clear that I'm to be kept separate from his real lives. The bitterness in the child's voice was heartbreaking. Jeffrey considered his options. The board meeting was minutes away. If he revealed Oliver's identity, He might force William to acknowledge his son, but he could also make the situation worse for the boy. Yet presenting Oliver's ideas as his own felt dishonest and would deny the child the recognition he so clearly deserved. "What if we find a middle path?" Jeffrey suggested. "I present these ideas, save the company, and then find a way to bring you into TechFusion officially, as the brilliant mind you are, without immediately revealing your connection to William." Hope flickered in Oliver's eyes. He would do that. Why? Because talent deserves to be nurtured regardless of age, and because every child deserves to be seen. Jeffrey checked his watch. "I have to go to the meeting now, but this conversation isn't over. Can you trust me to handle this right?" After a moment's hesitation, Oliver nodded. "My research indicated you were a man of integrity, Mr. Matthews. That's why I came to you first." Jeffrey smiled. "Wait for me in the executive lounge on the 40th floor. My assistant will make sure you have everything you need. When the meeting is over, we'll talk about next steps." He paused, then added, "And, Oliver, thank you. Regardless of what happens in that boardroom, you've already changed TechFusion for the better." As the boy headed toward the executive lounge, Jeffrey watched him go with mixed emotions. He had a board to face and a company to save, but he also had a child's future to protect. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the most powerful insights come from unexpected sources. If you believe in second chances and fresh perspectives, consider subscribing to not miss what happens next in this remarkable journey. The boardroom buzzed with tense conversation as Jeffrey entered. 12 of the most powerful executives in the tech industry fell silent, their expressions ranging from sympathy to barely concealed satisfaction at his predicament. William Hayes sat at the far end, his handsome, distinguished face betraying no emotion. Jeffrey found it difficult to look at him without seeing Oliver's small face superimposed on his features. The resemblance, now that he was aware of it, was unmistakable. "Jeffrey," Elizabeth Jennings said with manufactured warmth, "we moved the meeting up to accommodate some scheduling conflicts. I hope that wasn't too inconvenient." A convenient excuse to catch him unprepared, Jeffrey thought. "Not at all, Elizabeth. In fact, the timing is perfect." He connected his laptop to the presentation system. "I know we're here to discuss my replacement and the future of TechFusion, but I'd like to propose an alternative path forward." Several board members exchanged skeptical glances. Stephen Jenkins leaned forward, his bushy eyebrows furrowed. "Jeffrey, we appreciate your years of service, but the numbers don't lie. TechFusion has lost market share for 3 consecutive quarters. The Fusion X launch was a disaster, and consumer confidence in our brand is at an all-time low." "I'm aware of our challenges, Stephen," Jeffrey replied calmly. "But what if I told you I've identified both the root causes and the solutions?" William Hayes spoke for the first time. "We've had 6 strategy meetings in the past 4 months, Jeffrey. What's changed since our last discussion?" "Everything," Jeffrey thought, glancing at William's left wrist, where he knew the same crescent-shaped birthmark resided under his expensive shirt cuff. The birthmark his unacknowledged son had inherited. "What's changed is my perspective," Jeffrey answered, launching the presentation Oliver had prepared. "I've been looking at our problems through the wrong lens. We've been designing for the market as it exists today, not as it will exist tomorrow." For the next 30 minutes, Jeffrey presented Oliver's strategy, watching as skepticism gradually gave way to interest and then to genuine excitement around the table. The plan was comprehensive yet focused, innovative yet practical. It addressed TechFusion's core weaknesses while building on its established strengths. Most importantly, it reimagined their products from the perspective of the next generation of users. "These interface designs are remarkable," Dr. Patel noted, studying the mock-ups on her tablet. And I particularly appreciate the emphasis on sustainable manufacturing processes. But the development timeline seems ambitious. Too ambitious. Elizabeth Jennings interjected quickly, just as Oliver had predicted. We'd need at least 18 months to implement these changes. Jeffrey was ready for this objection. Actually, we've already completed preliminary testing on the core technology. We could have a prototype within 6 weeks and full production within 4 months. Elizabeth's mouth tightened. That's simply not possible with our current R&D capabilities. It is if we reorganize our development teams according to this model, Jeffrey countered, showing the next slide that detailed a streamlined organizational structure. And if we partner with Quantum Microtech for the processing components. William Hayes raised an eyebrow. Quantum is notoriously selective about their partnerships. What makes you think they'd work with us? Jeffrey met William's gaze directly. Because I've already spoken with their CEO. They're prepared to give us priority access to their next-generation chips in exchange for an exclusive 3-year contract. This was a bluff, but one based on Oliver's research, suggesting Quantum was eager to break into their market segment. Jeffrey made a mental note to make that call immediately after the meeting. As the presentation concluded, the energy in the room had transformed completely. Board members were leaning forward, asking detailed questions about implementation, excitedly discussing potential applications. Even Elizabeth Jennings had fallen silent, her planned coup seemingly forgotten in the face of a viable alternative. Stephen Jenkins cleared his throat. I have to say, Jeffrey, this is exceptional work. Where did these insights come from? This doesn't seem like the approach your team has taken previously. Jeffrey paused, feeling the weight of Oliver's trust in him. Let's just say I received some fresh perspective from an unexpected source, someone who sees the future more clearly than we do, because they'll be living in it long after we're gone. His eyes drifted to William Hayes, who was studying the product mock-ups with intense interest, unaware that they had been conceived by his own son. He'd like to propose a modified motion, Dr. Patel said. Instead of accepting Jeffrey's resignation, I move that we extend his contract for 1 year with the explicit mandate to implement this new strategy. Seconded, Jenkins said immediately. Elizabeth Jennings' face had grown tight with barely concealed fury. This is highly irregular. We should take time to properly evaluate this proposal before... I call for an immediate vote, William Hayes interrupted, surprising everyone. TechFusion needs decisive action now, not more deliberation. His eyes met Jeffrey's across the table. Unless you have reservations about your own plan, Jeffrey. Jeffrey held his gaze steadily. None whatsoever. But I do have one condition. The room went silent. I want to create a new division, Future Technologies. It will be staffed with our brightest minds, but also incorporate perspectives we've been missing, including bringing in younger consultants who understand where technology is headed because they represent its future users. William frowned slightly. Younger consultants? You mean recent college graduates? Among others, Jeffrey replied carefully. I've already identified our first junior advisor, someone with remarkable insight into our products and market. This sounds like an unnecessary complication, Elizabeth objected. The plan is solid, without adding unknown variables. The plan came from those unknown variables, Elizabeth, Jeffrey responded more sharply than he intended. And if we're going to change our trajectory, we need to change our thinking. That means new voices at the table. William Hayes studied Jeffrey with newfound curiosity. I'm intrigued. I'd like to meet this advisor who's had such an impact on your thinking. Jeffrey felt a surge of satisfaction. I thought you might. In fact, I believe this person will change how all of us think about the future of TechFusion. The vote was called 10-2 in favor of Jeffrey's continued leadership and the new strategy. Only Elizabeth Jennings and one of her allies opposed. As the meeting adjourned, board members gathered in excited clusters, discussing the possibilities the new direction opened up. William Hayes approached Jeffrey as the room emptied. "Impressive turnaround," William said, extending his hand. "For a while there, I thought we were going to lose you, and the company with you." Jeffrey shook his hand, noticing again the edge of the crescent birthmark just visible beneath William's cuff. "Sometimes we find inspiration in unexpected places." William nodded. "About this junior advisor of yours?" "You'll meet them very soon," Jeffrey promised. "In fact, I believe this person will have a significant impact on TechFusion's future, and perhaps on yours as well, William." A questioning look crossed William's face, but before he could respond, Jeffrey excused himself. He had a 6-year-old waiting in the executive lounge, a brilliant child who had just saved a multi-billion-dollar company and who deserved far more recognition than he had ever received, especially from his father. Jeffrey found Oliver in the executive lounge, surrounded by half a dozen open books he'd apparently discovered in the built-in library. The boy was intently reading what appeared to be a technical manual on semiconductor manufacturing, while occasionally making notes on his tablet. He looked up as Jeffrey entered, his expression immediately alert and questioning. "They approved it," Jeffrey announced, unable to keep the triumph from his voice. "Every part of your plan, and I'm still CEO." Oliver's face broke into a genuine smile, the first unguarded, childlike expression Jeffrey had seen from him. For a moment, the precocious business prodigy transformed into a normal 6-year-old, swinging his legs excitedly from the oversized leather chair. "Did they like the interface redesign? What about the manufacturing streamlining?" he asked eagerly. "They loved all of it," Jeffrey confirmed, sitting across from him. Dr. Patel was particularly impressed with the sustainability initiatives. Oliver nodded. "I thought she would be. Her doctoral thesis was on environmental impact reduction in manufacturing processes." Jeffrey shook his head in amazement. "I'm still trying to figure out how you learned all this, even with internet access and a private library." "I read fast," Oliver said simply, "and I remember everything." He closed his books and looked up at Jeffrey with those unnervingly perceptive blue eyes. "Did you tell them about me?" "Not specifically," Jeffrey replied carefully. "I told them I had a junior advisor with unique insights and that I wanted to create a new division that would include younger perspectives." He paused. "I also said I wanted them to meet this advisor soon." Oliver's excitement dimmed. "My father was there. Did he say anything?" "He voted to keep me as CEO and implement your plan, and he expressed interest in meeting my mysterious advisor." Jeffrey studied the boy's reaction. "Oliver, eventually William will have to know. We can control how that happens, but it can't remain a secret if you're going to be involved with TechFusion." The boy's shoulders slumped slightly. "He won't be pleased." "Maybe not at first," Jeffrey acknowledged, "but he might surprise you. Your ideas just saved his considerable investment in this company." Oliver absently traced the birthmark on his wrist. "When I was 4, I attended a charity gala where he was speaking. My caretaker took me. She thought it would be nice for me to see him even from a distance." His voice grew quieter. "I got away from her during the reception and walked right up to him. I told him my name was Oliver Hayes." Jeffrey felt a knot forming in his stomach. "What happened?" "He looked at me for exactly 3 seconds. He recognized me. I could tell he knew exactly who I was." Oliver's small face hardened with the memory. "Then he called security and had me returned to Ms. Sullivan. The next day, she received a formal letter reminding her that the terms of her employment strictly prohibited bringing me to any event where William Hayes might be present." Jeffrey felt a surge of anger toward his friend and board member. "That's inexcusable." "It's business," Oliver replied with a cynicism no child should possess. "I'm a liability, evidence of indiscretion that could damage his public image and his marriage. The optimal solution was to provide financial support while maintaining complete separation. He looked down. It's logical, really. No, Jeffrey said firmly. It's not logical. It's cowardly. And it's cruel. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Finally, Oliver spoke in a smaller voice than before. What happens now? With the company, I mean. Jeffrey recognized the deliberate change of subject and allowed it. Now we implement your plan, starting with the Future Technologies division I proposed. And who will lead it? Oliver asked. On paper, I will, Jeffrey replied. But in reality, I'd like you to be its driving force as my special advisor. The boy's eyes widened. You're serious? The board would never approve a child advisor. They don't need to know your age yet. We'll establish your value first, then address the unique circumstances. Jeffrey leaned forward. Oliver, what you did today was extraordinary. You deserve to be part of building the future you envisioned. And frankly, TechFusion needs your perspective. Hope and skepticism warred on Oliver's face. But how would it work practically? I still have school, and Ms. Sullivan would have questions. We can arrange for you to visit the office after school 3 days a week, officially as part of an advanced educational program. Jeffrey was thinking rapidly now, the pieces falling into place. Many corporations have STEM outreach initiatives for gifted children. We'll establish one at TechFusion as cover, with you as our first participant. Oliver considered this, his analytical mind visibly working through the implications. That could work. Ms. Sullivan is always looking for enrichment activities for me. A hint of excitement returned to his voice. I could actually help implement the strategy instead of just designing it. Exactly, Jeffrey confirmed. And in time, once your value is firmly established, we can gradually transition to a more formal recognition of your role. He didn't mention William Hayes, but the implication hung between them. Eventually, William would have to confront the reality of his son's existence and brilliance. Oliver nodded slowly. I accept your proposal, Mr. Matthews. He extended his small hand formally, and Jeffrey shook it, struck again by the contrast between the boy's adult mannerisms and his child-sized appearance. Now, Jeffrey said, checking his watch, it's almost 3 p.m. We should get you to the Museum of Natural History before Ms. Sullivan worries. Oliver packed his tablet and books into his briefcase. As they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Jeffrey noticed the boy staring at the illuminated floor numbers with unusual intensity. Something on your mind? Jeffrey asked. Oliver hesitated. What if he still refuses to acknowledge me even after everything? The question, vulnerable, uncertain, and so profoundly childlike, pierced Jeffrey's heart. In that moment he saw beyond the business prodigy to the wounded little boy seeking his father's approval. Then it will be his loss, Jeffrey said firmly. But Oliver, I want you to understand something important. Your value isn't determined by William Hayes's acknowledgement. What you did today would be remarkable for a person of any age. You should be proud of yourself, regardless of anyone else's reaction. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. As they crossed toward the exit, Jeffrey was acutely aware of the small figure walking beside him. This extraordinary child who had just altered the course of a multi-billion-dollar corporation with nothing but his intelligence and determination. Outside, the afternoon sun had emerged fully, transforming the rain-slicked streets into gleaming mirrors. Jeffrey hailed a taxi and gave the driver the museum address. I'll see you on Monday after school, Jeffrey confirmed as Oliver climbed into the vehicle. I'll have security clearance arranged and an office set up in the Future Technologies section. Oliver nodded, then paused with his hand on the door. Mr. Matthews, thank you for listening to me. Most adults don't. I suspect that's their loss as well, Jeffrey replied with a smile. And Oliver? You can call me Jeffrey." As the taxi pulled away, Jeffrey watched until it disappeared into the Manhattan traffic. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Sandra," he said to his assistant, "I need you to set up a new division immediately, Future Technologies, and find me everything you can about educational programs for gifted children. We're going to be establishing one at TechFusion." He paused. "Also, clear my schedule for dinner tomorrow night. I need to have a very important conversation with William Hayes about the future and about a brilliant young mind who's going to change everything." The pieces were in motion. A company had been saved. A child prodigy would have the platform his brilliance deserved. And soon, a father would have to face the son he had tried so hard to keep hidden from his world. Jeffrey scrolled to William's contact information, his finger hovering over the call button. The conversation ahead would be difficult, possibly friendship ending. William might never forgive him for the forced confrontation, but some principles transcended business relationships and personal loyalty. Some injustices demanded correction. "Sometimes," Jeffrey murmured to himself as he pressed the call button, "the most important disruptions aren't technological at all." The exclusive restaurant overlooking Central Park hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of fine china. Jeffrey had deliberately chosen the Terrace, William's favorite dining establishment, for their meeting. Its private alcoves offered discretion, while the familiar setting might help ease the difficult conversation ahead. William Hayes arrived precisely on time, as he always did. Tall and distinguished, with salt and pepper hair and the same striking blue eyes as his son, he carried himself with the practiced confidence of a man accustomed to power. He slid into the seat across from Jeffrey, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "2 private dinners in 1 week, William commented as he unfolded his napkin. "I'm beginning to feel popular." Jeffrey raised an eyebrow. "Another engagement?" "Elizabeth Jennings," William replied. "Damage control after yesterday's board meeting, I suspect. She spent 2 hours trying to convince me your plan was too risky." He signaled to the waiter for his usual scotch. "I told her innovation always carries risk, but stagnation guarantees failure." "Wise perspective," Jeffrey said, studying his friend of 15 years. How could this intelligent, seemingly principled man have abandoned his own child so completely? "Elizabeth has grown too comfortable with the status quo." William nodded. "She also implied your mysterious advisor might be a corporate spy feeding you competitor information." He chuckled. "I assured her that Jeffrey Matthews was too careful for such an obvious trap." The waiter brought their drinks. Scotch for William, sparkling water for Jeffrey. After placing their dinner orders and ensuring their privacy, Jeffrey decided to approach the subject carefully. "William, how long have we known each other?" William looked mildly surprised at the question. "Since Boston Tech." "What, 2003? Going on 15 years now. Why? In that time, have I ever interfered in your personal lives?" A subtle wariness entered William's expression. "No, we've both respected that boundary. Business colleagues first, social friends second, personal matters separate." Jeffrey nodded. "I've always admired your compartmentalization. Work William, social William, family William, all perfectly segmented like divisions in a corporation." William took a slow sip of his scotch. "You didn't invite me to dinner to admire my life management skills, Jeffrey. What's this about?" "I met your son yesterday." 5 simple words. Jeffrey delivered them quietly, without accusation, but their impact was immediate. William's face drained of color, then flushed red. His hand tightened around his glass until his knuckles whitened. For several long moments, William said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously controlled. "I don't know what you're talking about, Oliver Hayes," Jeffrey continued calmly. 6 3/4 years old. Extraordinary intelligence. Your exact eyes. Your birthmark. He gestured toward William's wrist. He walked into my office yesterday morning, sat in my chair, and proceeded to save our company with the strategy you praised so highly at the board meeting. William's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally settled into a cold, defensive mask. This conversation is inappropriate, Jeffrey. My personal affairs are not— He's not an affair, William. He's a child. Your child. Jeffrey leaned forward. A remarkable one who's been studying TechFusion obsessively because it's the only connection he has to you. William's jaw clenched. How did he get into your office? The security protocols are insufficient, as he pointed out, Jeffrey interrupted. But that's hardly the relevant issue here. William glanced around the restaurant, though their alcove shielded them from view. I provide generously for the boy. He wants for nothing, his education, his care, except for a father, Jeffrey finished. He told me about the charity gala, William, about how you called security when your own son approached you. A flash of shame crossed William's face before he mastered it. You have no idea how complicated this situation is. Rebecca would never— I'm not interested in your rationalizations, Jeffrey cut in. I understand the messy reality. You had an affair, it produced a child, and acknowledging him would damage your marriage and public image. Tale as old as time. He paused, letting his words sink in. But here's what you don't seem to grasp. That boy saved the company you helped build. The strategies and insights that impressed you so much yesterday, all his. Disbelief warred with curiosity on William's face. That's impossible. No child could have— I watched him prepare that entire presentation. I questioned him extensively on every aspect of it. He understood not just our technology and market position, but the personal motivations of each board member, including your preference for Japanese manufacturing processes over German ones. William sat back, visibly shaken. If what you're saying is true, it is. Then the boy is even more exceptional than his early test scores indicated. A hint of pride flickered across William's face before he suppressed it. Jeffrey pressed his advantage. He's beyond exceptional, William, and he's desperate for your acknowledgement, though he'd never admit it. William's expression hardened again. What exactly do you want from me, Jeffrey? To blow up my marriage? To invite scandal that would affect TechFusion's stock price and stability? To disrupt the lives of my daughters who have no idea they have a half-brother? I want you to meet with him. Officially, professionally. Jeffrey outlined the plan for the Future Technologies Division and the educational program that would bring Oliver into the company. No one needs to know he's your son yet, but he deserves the chance to contribute his gifts, and you deserve the opportunity to know him. William stared out the window at the darkening park, conflict evident in his features. You've put me in an impossible position. No, Jeffrey corrected. You put yourself there 7 years ago. I'm offering you a path to something better for Oliver, for TechFusion, and yes, even for you. Their entrees arrived, creating a natural pause in the tense conversation. Neither man touched their food. He has your analytical mind, Jeffrey said more gently, your strategic thinking, but he has something you lost somewhere along the way. Genuine vision. He sees possibilities where the rest of us see only constraints. William absently touched his wrist, where the crescent birthmark lay hidden beneath his cuff, the same mark that had betrayed Oliver's parentage. Rebecca would recognize him immediately. We have the same eyes, the same— Cross that bridge if necessary, Jeffrey advised. For now, he's simply a brilliant child participating in our new educational initiative who happens to have valuable insights into our products. William fell silent again, visibly calculating risks and outcomes, as he always did when facing a difficult decision. Finally, he picked up his fork, signaling a shift in his thinking. "Tell me more about this future technologies division," he said, his tone deliberately neutral. "How exactly would the educational component work?" Jeffrey outlined the structure in greater detail, explaining how Oliver would initially participate as part of a small group of gifted students, gradually transitioning to a more focused advisory role as his value became evident to the wider organization. As he spoke, he watched William's expression carefully, noting the subtle tells he'd learned to recognize over 15 years of friendship. The slight relaxation around the eyes, the thoughtful rather than defensive posture. William was considering it. "The board would need to approve the educational initiative," William noted. "But after yesterday's presentation, they'd likely support almost anything you proposed." "Exactly," Jeffrey agreed. "We frame it as investing in future talent while gaining valuable product insights from our eventual user base. The business case is solid, independent of any personal considerations." William took a measured sip of his scotch. "And if I refuse? If I don't want any contact with the boy?" Jeffrey met his gaze steadily. "Then I would proceed with the initiative anyway, with Oliver as its centerpiece. His insights are too valuable to ignore." He paused. "But he would know I had tried to facilitate a connection, and he would have actively rejected the opportunity." "I believe you're a better man than that, William." The subtle manipulation was not lost on William, who gave a short, humorless laugh. 15 years of friendship, and this is the first time you've ever strong-armed me." 15 years of friendship is precisely why I'm doing it," Jeffrey replied evenly, "because I respect you too much to let you continue making this particular mistake." William fell silent again, his food still untouched. Beyond their alcove, the restaurant continued its elegant dinner service, waiters moving efficiently between tables, soft, classical music, providing a cultured backdrop to their moral standoffs. Finally, Williams spoke. "One meeting, professional context, no acknowledgement of any personal connection." His voice was clipped, each word precisely measured. "I'll observe him as part of a group of students in this program you're proposing. Nothing more committed than that." Relief and disappointment mingled in Jeffrey's response. "It's a start. It may also be the end," William warned. "If I determine this situation creates unacceptable risk to my family or to TechFusion, I'll withdraw my support from your initiative entirely." Jeffrey recognized the threat, but chose not to engage with it. The first session is scheduled for next Thursday afternoon. 4 students, including Oliver, will present their feedback on the Fusion X interface redesign. He pulled out his phone, sent a brief message, and then placed its screen down on the table. "I've just confirmed your attendance as an observing board member." William's jaw tightened at the presumption, but he gave a curt nod. "Thursday, then." He finally began to eat, signaling an end to that topic of conversation. "Now, tell me more about this quantum microtech partnership you mentioned yesterday. Their chief engineer is notoriously difficult to work with." Jeffrey allowed the change of subject, recognizing that William needed time to process the emotional implications of their discussion. They spent the remainder of dinner discussing technical specifications and partnership agreements. Safe, familiar territory for both men. As they parted outside the restaurant, William paused before stepping into his waiting car. "You're taking quite a risk, Jeffrey. For the company, for the boy." He met Jeffrey's eyes with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "And for our friendship. Some things matter more than risk avoidance," Jeffrey replied simply. "I'll see you Thursday." As William's car pulled away into the Manhattan traffic, Jeffrey found himself wondering what Oliver was doing at that moment. Was he reading advanced engineering texts in his bedroom? working on new product designs, or was he doing what normal 6-year-olds did in the evening, playing with toys, watching cartoons, being tucked into bed by his caretaker? Jeffrey realized how little he actually knew about the boy's daily life beyond the corporate prodigy who had walked into his office. Did Oliver have friends his own age? Did he ever just play and laugh like a normal child? The thought that he might be sacrificing normal childhood for intellectual advancement created an unexpected ache in Jeffrey's chest. As he walked toward his own waiting car, Jeffrey made a silent promise to both himself and Oliver. This extraordinary child would have the opportunity to use his remarkable gifts, but Jeffrey would also ensure he experienced the childhood joys that his father's absence and his unusual intellect might have denied him. Thursday would be the first test, not just of William's willingness to acknowledge his son, but of Jeffrey's ability to bridge these two worlds: the corporate environment where Oliver's mind thrived and the nurturing space that his young spirit deserved. The newly established Future Technologies Lab gleamed with cutting-edge design. Interactive touchscreens covered the walls, holographic projectors occupied the center of the room, and modular workstations could be reconfigured for various project needs. For the past week, Jeffrey had overseen its creation with meticulous attention to detail, determined to build a space worthy of the innovative thinking it would house. Today was the inaugural session of TechFusion's Next Generation Innovators program, the educational initiative created as Oliver's cover. Jeffrey stood at the back of the room, watching as 3 children besides Oliver were led in by their parents. All had been carefully selected from local gifted programs, brilliant kids, though none approached Oliver's extraordinary intellect. Their presence would help normalize Oliver's involvement while providing genuine diversity of thought. At precisely 3:30 p.m., Oliver arrived with Ms. Sullivan, his caretaker. The woman was exactly as Jeffrey had imagined from Oliver's brief descriptions: efficient-looking, kind-faced, somewhere in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair, pulled into a neat bun. She surveyed the lad with obvious approval. "Mr. Matthews," she said, extending her hand. "Ms. Caroline Sullivan, thank you for including Oliver in this program. He's been talking about nothing else all week, and Oliver stood beside her in another miniature suit, looking both excited and nervous as he scanned the room. His gaze faltered momentarily as he noticed the other children, as though he hadn't considered he wouldn't be the only participant. "Welcome, Ms. Sullivan, Oliver." Jeffrey shook hands with both of them. "We're thrilled to have such bright young minds providing input on our next generation of products." He introduced them to Dr. Eliza Morton, a developmental psychologist who would be facilitating the sessions, and then showed Oliver to his workstation. The boy immediately began exploring the advanced interface, his small fingers navigating the complex systems with surprising dexterity. "He's quite remarkable," Ms. Sullivan said quietly to Jeffrey as they stepped away. "I've been his caretaker since he was 2, and he never ceases to amaze me." She hesitated, then added in an even lower voice, "I want you to know that I'm aware of who his father is. It's not discussed, but I believe Oliver deserves opportunities like this where his gifts can be recognized." Her eyes conveyed a deeper meaning. "By everyone." Jeffrey nodded, appreciating her discretion and obvious care for Oliver. "That's exactly what we hope to provide here." As Ms. Sullivan left with the other parents, who would return in 2 hours, Jeffrey checked his watch. William Hayes was due to arrive in 15 minutes. The knowledge sent a ripple of anxiety through him. Despite William's agreement at dinner, Jeffrey half expected him to manufacture some emergency to avoid this encounter. Dr. Morton gathered the children in the center of the lab, introducing them to each other and explaining the day's challenge, evaluating and suggesting improvements for TechFusion's upcoming interface redesign. Oliver seemed initially awkward with the other children, hanging back slightly as they introduced themselves with typical childhood enthusiasm. Jeffrey recognized the behaviors of a child more accustomed to adult company than peers his own age. At 3:45 p.m., as the children were breaking into pairs to begin their first exercise, William Hayes entered the lab. Though Jeffrey had messaged him that morning to confirm, seeing him actually walk through the door brought a sense of relief. William was immaculately dressed as always, his expression carefully neutral as he surveyed the room. Jeffrey met him at the entrance. "Thank you for coming." William gave a terse nod. "As agreed." His eyes immediately found Oliver across the room, and something flickered across his face, a complex emotion Jeffrey couldn't quite identify. "The students will present their initial feedback in about 30 minutes, Jeffrey explained, deliberately casual. "Until then, we can observe from the conference room through the glass wall if you prefer some distance." "No," William said after a moment. "I'd like to observe directly. As a board member interested in our educational initiatives, it would be natural for me to engage." Jeffrey concealed his surprise. "Of course, let me introduce you to the group." As they approached, Oliver looked up from his workstation. The moment his eyes met William's, the boy froze, his small body tensing visibly. Though his expression remained carefully controlled, Jeffrey could see the storm of emotions behind his composed facade. "Students," Jeffrey announced, "I'd like to introduce Mr. William Hayes, one of TechFusion's board members. He'll be observing your session today and is very interested in your insights." The other children looked up with mild curiosity before returning to their tasks. Oliver remained perfectly still, his eyes never leaving William's face. "A pleasure to meet our future innovators," William said smoothly. If he was affected by Oliver's intense gaze, he hid it well. "Don't mind me. Please continue your excellent work." Dr. Morton engaged William in a brief explanation of the program's objectives, allowing Jeffrey to move closer to Oliver. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Oliver blinked, as if coming out of a trance. "Yes," he whispered, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. I didn't expect him to actually come. Mindy, he's here because he was impressed by your ideas," Jeffrey said carefully, "even if he doesn't yet know they were yours specifically." Oliver nodded, visibly gathering himself. "I understand." He straightened his small shoulders. "I'll make sure my presentation is flawless." As the session progressed, Jeffrey observed a fascinating transformation. Initially, Oliver had been hesitant, almost withdrawn around the other children. But as they began discussing the interface problems, his natural brilliance emerged. He didn't dominate the conversation, but instead skillfully drew out his partner's ideas, building on them with his own insights in a way that made their collaboration shine. William moved around the room, ostensibly reviewing all the children's work, but Jeffrey noticed how his attention continually drifted back to Oliver. Each time he approached Oliver's workstation, the boy would tense slightly, before launching into extraordinarily articulate explanations of his thoughts on the interface design. "What do you think of this navigation structure?" William asked Oliver during one such interaction, pointing to the boy's redesign of the menu system. Oliver's voice was steady, though Jeffrey could see the effort it took. "It's inefficient. Users have to make 3 clicks to reach commonly used functions." His small finger traced a path on the screen. "If we reorganize it this way, we reduce it to 1 click for the top 20% of user actions based on the usage data." William studied the proposal, genuine interest replacing his practiced politeness. "That's remarkably intuitive. Have you considered how this would scale across different device sizes?" "Yes," Oliver replied, pulling up another screen. "I've designed a responsive framework that adapts based on screen dimensions and use patterns." He demonstrated how the interface would transform between devices, his movements quick and precise. William's eyebrows rose slightly. the closest he ever came to showing surprise in professional settings. "This is university-level design work." Oliver met his gaze directly. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." Something unspoken passed between them in that brief moment of eye contact, a recognition of shared intellect, if nothing else. The presentations began 30 minutes later. Each pair of children took turns explaining their findings and recommendations. The other students were impressive for their age, bright, articulate with creative approaches to the problems. But when Oliver and his partner presented, the difference was unmistakable. While his partner, a bright girl named Sophia, handled the introduction, Oliver delivered the technical analysis with the precision and insight of a seasoned product designer. He referenced user experience studies, explained cognitive psychology principles that informed their redesign choices, and demonstrated a working prototype he had somehow built during the brief session. Throughout his presentation, Oliver never once looked directly at William, though Jeffrey knew the boy was acutely aware of his father's presence. He spoke to the room at large, his voice clear and steady, his points logically structured and convincingly delivered. When they finished, there was a moment of stunned silence before Dr. Morton led the appreciative applause. Even the other gifted children seemed impressed. William's face had lost its careful neutrality, replaced by an expression Jeffrey recognized well, the look he got when encountering a technological breakthrough that would transform the market. "Exceptional work, all of you," Dr. Morton said warmly. "You've given us tremendous insights to consider. Let's take a short break before our final activity." As the children dispersed to the refreshment table, William pulled Jeffrey aside, his voice low and intense. "That boy, Oliver, his abilities are extraordinary. Where did you find him?" "His test scores identified him as exceptionally gifted," Jeffrey replied carefully. "But scores don't capture the full range of his capabilities." William was still watching Oliver, who was awkwardly attempting to make small talk with the other children while stealing glances in their direction. "He reminds me of..." William trailed off, then cleared his throat. "He has remarkable potential." "Yes," Jeffrey agreed. "He does. I'd like to speak with him privately," William said suddenly. Jeffrey felt a spike of alarm. "I don't think that's a good idea right now. This is his first session and..." "Not as his father," William interrupted, his voice barely audible. "As a board member impressed by a program participant. Nothing inappropriate, nothing revealing." Jeffrey studied his friend's face, searching for his true intentions. "What's changed, William?" William's eyes remained on Oliver. "Nothing has changed. I'm simply doing what you asked, engaging professionally with the program. That boy has insights our R&D department would envy. It would be negligent of me as a board member not to explore that potential further." Before Jeffrey could respond, Dr. Morton called the children back for their final activity, a collaborative challenge to design a futuristic communication device. As the session resumed, Jeffrey watched William watching Oliver, seeing something shift in his friend's typically guarded demeanor. The final hour passed quickly. Oliver seemed to grow more comfortable, even occasionally smiling at his teammates' ideas. His natural leadership emerged not through dominance, but through thoughtful questions that guided the group toward innovative solutions. When they presented their final concept, a neural interface communication system with remarkably practical implementation steps, even Dr. Morton appeared impressed by their sophistication. As the session concluded, and parents began arriving to collect their children, William approached Jeffrey again. "I need 10 minutes with him, in your office, before his caretaker arrives." "William, this isn't a request, Jeffrey." William's voice was tight, with some emotion Jeffrey couldn't quite identify. 10 minutes. Professional context only. You can observe if you're concerned." Jeffrey hesitated, then nodded. "I'll arrange it. But at the first sign that this is causing him distress, I understand. Jeffrey approached Oliver, who was shutting down his workstation. Oliver, Mr. Hayes was very impressed with your contributions today. He'd like to speak with you briefly before Ms. Sullivan arrives. Would that be all right with you? A complex series of emotions crossed the boy's face. Hope, fear, determination, and finally a carefully constructed calm. Yes, that would be acceptable. Jeffrey led them to his office, 2 floors up, his mind racing with concern about what William intended. In the elevator, Oliver stood perfectly straight, his small face composed, but his hands betraying his nervousness as they fidgeted with the strap of his tablet case. Inside Jeffrey's office, William asked, "Could we have a few minutes privately, Jeffrey?" "I don't think." "It's okay, Mr. Matthews," Oliver interrupted, his voice steadier than Jeffrey would have expected. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Hayes alone." After a moment's hesitation, Jeffrey nodded. "I'll be right outside. 5 minutes." As he closed the door behind him, Jeffrey felt a wave of anxiety. He had engineered this confrontation, believing it necessary for both Oliver and William, but now worried about the potential emotional fallout for the child who had already endured so much rejection. Through the glass wall of his office, Jeffrey could see William and Oliver standing across from each other, separated by several feet and decades of experience, yet unmistakably connected by the same analytical eyes, the same determined set of their jaws, and the same birthmark hidden beneath their sleeves. Father and son, face to face at last. 2 brilliant minds circling each other cautiously in a moment that could change both their lives forever. Inside Jeffrey's office, silence stretched between William and Oliver like a taut wire. The boy stood with remarkable composure, his small shoulders squared, his gaze steady, despite the emotions Jeffrey had seen flickering beneath the surface moments earlier. William moved to Jeffrey's desk, leaning against it rather than taking the power position behind it. The gesture, whether calculated or instinctive, reduced some of the height difference between them. "Your presentation today was extraordinary," William began, his tone professionally appreciative, "particularly your insights on adaptive interfaces." "Thank you, Mr. Hayes," Oliver replied formally. "You speak with remarkable precision for someone so young," William continued. "Where did you learn to articulate technical concepts so clearly?" Oliver hesitated, then answered truthfully. "I read transcripts of technology conference keynotes and board presentations. I study the language patterns of effective communicators." A beat passed before he added, "Including yours." William's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mine?" "Your TED Talk on predictive technology from 2020 was particularly instructive," Oliver said. "You explained complex processes without condescension while maintaining audience engagement. I've watched it 17 times." Something shifted in William's expression. Surprise, followed by an emotion more complex. "I'm flattered you found it useful." He studied Oliver more intently. "Your technical knowledge significantly exceeds graduate-level understanding in several domains. That can't come just from reading and watching videos." Oliver's chin lifted slightly, a gesture Jeffrey had seen William make countless times when defending a position. "I understand concepts quickly, and I remember everything I learn." "An eidetic memory?" William asked. "Among other cognitive advantages," Oliver confirmed without pride or modesty, simply stating a fact. William nodded, as though confirming a theory. "The interface redesign you proposed today, did you develop that specifically for this session, or was it something you'd been considering previously?" A careful question, Jeffrey realized, from his position outside the door. William was probing how long Oliver had been studying TechFusion's products. "I've had an interest in TechFusion's interface design for approximately 16 months, Oliver answered, with characteristic precision. I've identified 73 potential improvements to the current system. Today's presentation covered 12 of them. William's expression remained neutral, but Jeffrey could see the calculation behind his eyes. 16 months ago would have been when Oliver was just 5 years old, already analyzing the company's products with professional-level scrutiny. "May I ask why TechFusion?" William inquired, his tone deliberately casual. "There are many technology companies with more child-focused products." The question hung in the air between them, the closest William had come to acknowledging their connection, even indirectly. Oliver's composure faltered momentarily, his small fingers tightening around the strap of his tablet case. TechFusion's mission statement references building technology that shapes how future generations will live and work. The boy quoted precisely. "I am a future generation. It seemed logical to contribute to technology I will eventually use." It was a careful answer that avoided the personal truth. William's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing the evasion but not pressing further. "Your caretaker, Miss Sullivan, was it? She supports your interest in technology?" Oliver nodded. "She provides me with educational resources and significant autonomy to pursue my interests." A flicker of what might have been affection crossed his face. "She tries to ensure I also engage in age-appropriate activities." "Such as?" William prompted. For the first time, Oliver seemed uncertain how to respond. "I swim on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have a collection of model airplanes. He hesitated, then admitted, "I like superhero movies." The simple, childlike admission created a brief crack in the professional veneer they both maintained. William's expression softened momentarily. "Which superhero is your favorite?" he asked, his tone lighter. "Iron Man," Oliver replied without hesitation. Though his technology often violates basic principles of physics, his character arc demonstrates significant emotional growth and the responsible application of intelligence. William's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile, a thoughtful analysis. He glanced at his watch, aware their time was limited. "Oliver, I'd like to propose something. Your contributions today were genuinely valuable. I'd be interested in seeing more of your 73 interface improvements." Oliver's eyes widened slightly. "You would?" "Yes. With Mr. Matthews's permission, I'd like to establish a direct communication channel for you to share your insights. As a board member with specific interest in product development." William's phrasing remained deliberately formal, professional, a buffer against the personal reality they both knew, but neither acknowledged. I would appreciate that opportunity," Oliver said carefully, his voice betraying a hint of the excitement his controlled expression concealed. William moved to the side table where Jeffrey kept a business card holder. He selected one of his cards and wrote something on the back before extending it to Oliver. "This is my private email address," he explained, as Oliver accepted the card with solemn reverence. "Not my assistant's, not my public contact. Messages sent here come directly to me. You may use it to send your thoughts on our products. I will personally review everything you send." Oliver stared at the card, then carefully placed it in his tablet case as though it were a precious artifact. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." William straightened, professional demeanor firmly back in place. "Thank you for your contributions today, Oliver. TechFusion values innovative thinking regardless of its source." The formal words might have ended their interaction, but William hesitated, studying the boy's face with an intensity that belied his detached tone. Something unresolved hung in the air between them. "May I ask you one more question?" William said suddenly. Oliver nodded, his expression guarded once more. "What drives you? Most children your age are concerned with games and friends and immediate pleasures. You're analyzing corporate product strategies and interface designs. Why?" It was the most direct, personal question William had posed, one that pierced through their carefully maintained professional exchange. Oliver didn't answer immediately, seeming to weigh his response carefully. "I believe intelligence carries responsibility," he finally said, looking directly into William's eyes, the same eyes he had inherited. "Potential without purpose is wasted. I want my capabilities to matter." The words struck with unmistakable impact. William's carefully neutral expression cracked, revealing a flash of recognition and perhaps regret before he mastered himself again. "They already do," he said quietly, the professional tone momentarily abandoned. A knock on the door signaled Jeffrey's return. The brief, unguarded moment between them passed as quickly as it had appeared. By the time Jeffrey entered, both had resumed their composed facades. "Ms. Sullivan has arrived," Jeffrey announced, studying both their expressions for clues about their conversation. "Thank you for your time, Oliver," William said formally, extending his hand. Oliver looked at the offered hand with momentary surprise before shaking it with grave dignity. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Hayes." As Oliver turned to leave, William spoke once more. "That birthmark on your wrist," he gestured to the crescent shape visible as Oliver's sleeve had ridden up during their handshake. "It's unusual." Oliver froze, his eyes darting to William's face. "I have one exactly like it," William continued, rolling up his own sleeve to reveal the matching mark. "A rare genetic trait." The air in the room seemed to crystallize. Oliver stared at the identical birthmark on his father's wrist, his carefully maintained composure wavering. "Some would call that a remarkable coincidence," William said, his voice deliberately even as he rolled his sleeve back down. Oliver swallowed, visibly. "I don't believe in coincidences, Mr. Hayes." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Only patterns that haven't been fully recognized yet." Their eyes met in a moment of perfect, unspoken understanding. William gave a slight nod, acknowledgement of a truth neither could openly state yet. "We should get you back to Ms. Sullivan," Jeffrey intervened gently, placing a protective hand on Oliver's shoulder. As they walked back toward the elevator, Oliver reached into his tablet case and touched the business card, as if reassuring himself it was real. The small gesture, so childlike in its wonder and hope, made Jeffrey's chest tighten with emotion. In the elevator, Oliver finally spoke. "He noticed my birthmark." "Yes," Jeffrey confirmed, "he did. And he showed me his." Oliver's voice held a question. "Also, yes?" Oliver was quiet for another moment. "That's not nothing, is it?" Jeffrey squeezed the boy's shoulder gently. "No, Oliver, that's definitely not nothing." When they reached the lab where Ms. Sullivan waited, Oliver's professional demeanor returned instantly. He thanked Jeffrey formally for the opportunity to participate in the program and confirmed he would return for the next session. As he walked away with his caretaker, Jeffrey noticed how Oliver's other hand remained pressed against his tablet case, where William's card was safely stored. From behind him, a voice spoke quietly. "He's even more remarkable up close." Jeffrey turned to find William watching Oliver's departure, his expression unusually unguarded. "Yes, he is." "Did you know about his abilities before he walked into your office that day?" William asked, his eyes still following the small figure until the elevator doors closed. "No," Jeffrey admitted. "He completely blindsided me." William nodded slowly. "He has her eyes too, you know. Amanda's. The shape is hers, though the color—" He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "The email I gave him. It's real. I'll read whatever he sends." "That's a start," Jeffrey acknowledged, studying his friend's face. "What changed, William? When you walked in today, you were determined to maintain complete professional distance." William was silent for a long moment. When he explained his interface redesign, he used exactly the same hand gesture I use when presenting to the board. Not similar, identical. The precise same movement. His voice had a strange quality Jeffrey had never heard before. "I've never met him before. He couldn't have learned that from me." "Nature versus nurture," Jeffrey observed. "Indeed." William's expression turned introspective. He said his favorite superhero is Iron Man because of his emotional growth and responsible application of intelligence. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "When Rebecca asked me the same question years ago, I gave almost identical reasoning." The two men stood in silence, watching the now empty corridor where Oliver had disappeared. "This doesn't change anything fundamentally," William said eventually, his tone firming as his barriers reasserted themselves. "My family situation remains complex. The potential consequences of public acknowledgement remain unacceptable." "But," Jeffrey prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification. William took a deep breath. "But I believe TechFusion would benefit significantly from his continued involvement in this program, and I would appreciate regular updates on his contributions." He looked at Jeffrey directly. "As a board member with specific interest in product development, of course," Jeffrey nodded, recognizing the small concession for what it was, the first tentative step towards something neither of them could yet define. "Of course," he agreed. "And if, hypothetically, a board member wanted to contribute additional educational resources to a particularly promising participant in our program, that would be entirely appropriate, wouldn't it?" William understood the implied question immediately. "Entirely appropriate. Anonymous corporate sponsorship of exceptional talent is common practice." He paused. "Hypothetically speaking." As William turned to leave, Jeffrey called after him. "He reads the transcripts of your speeches, watches your interviews, studies your presentations." William stopped, but didn't turn around. "He's been looking for you his entire life, William, even when he pretends he hasn't." William's shoulders tensed, then relaxed on an exhaled breath. Without responding, he continued toward the elevator, his normally confident stride slightly less certain than usual. Jeffrey returned to his office, replaying the events of the day in his mind. He'd witnessed something transformative, though its full implications remained unclear. A brilliant child seeking connection, a successful man confronting a truth he had long avoided. Two extraordinary minds recognizing themselves in each other. It wasn't resolution, not yet, but it was a beginning. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity at TechFusion. The Future Technologies division had transformed from concept to reality with remarkable speed, fueled by the enthusiastic board approval following Jeffrey's successful presentation. The Next Generation Innovators program had expanded to 2 sessions per week, with Oliver attending both. Jeffrey sat in his office, reviewing the latest prototype designs based on the children's recommendations. Oliver's influence was evident throughout. Elegant solutions that somehow balanced cutting-edge technology with intuitive usability. The early test results were beyond promising. Focus groups responded to the new interfaces with unprecedented enthusiasm. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Sandra, his assistant, entered with a concerned expression. "Mr. Matthews, Oliver Hayes is here to see you. He says it's urgent." Jeffrey frowned. "Oliver wasn't scheduled to be at TechFusion today. Send him in, please." Oliver entered, impeccably dressed as always, but his usual composed demeanor was noticeably absent. His face was pale, his movements tense. "Oliver, what's wrong? Where's Miss Sullivan?" "She thinks I'm a chess club," Oliver admitted, closing the door behind him. "I took a taxi here instead. I needed to speak with you immediately." Jeffrey gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down. What's happened?" Oliver sat, but perched on the edge of the seat, his tablet clutched tightly in his hands. "I believe TechFusion is about to be attacked. A significant security breach is imminent." "What?" Jeffrey leaned forward. Explain. Oliver unlocked his tablet and turned it to show Jeffrey. For the past 2 weeks, I've been monitoring unusual patterns in how external systems interact with TechFusion's network. There's been a systematic probing of vulnerabilities, sophisticated, carefully disguised, but definitely coordinated. Jeffrey studied the data on the screen, alarm growing as he recognized the implication. How did you even access this information? This looks like internal security data. Oliver had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I may have created an administrative account during my first week here, for research purposes only, he added quickly. I would never misuse access. Under normal circumstances, Jeffrey would have been concerned about this security violation, but the potential threat appeared far more pressing. What exactly are you seeing? The attackers are preparing for a major data extraction, Oliver explained, pointing to several charts. Based on their target points, they're after the quantum encryption protocols for Fusion X's secure communications. Jeffrey felt his blood run cold. The quantum encryption technology was TechFusion's most valuable intellectual property, a breakthrough that put them years ahead of competitors. If that was stolen... Have you alerted security? He asked, reaching for his phone. Not yet, Oliver replied. That's why I came directly to you. The attack pattern indicates an insider is involved. Someone with high-level access who has been disabling specific security monitoring modules before each probing attempt. Jeffrey's hand froze above his phone. An insider? Who? Oliver hesitated. The evidence points to someone on the executive team. The security bypasses require authorization codes only 7 people possess. He pulled up another screen. I've narrowed it to 3 likely candidates based on access patterns and suspicious network activities. Jeffrey stared at the names on the screen, his mind reeling. Elizabeth Jennings was at the top of the list. After her failed attempt to have him removed, she had been noticeably cold, but professionally correct. The other names belonged to TechFusion's CTO and the head of international operations, both trusted executives with decades of service. This is a serious accusation, Oliver, Jeffrey said slowly. We need absolute certainty before moving forward. I understand. Oliver brought up another screen showing complex data patterns. That's why I designed a track. If you approve, we can deploy it immediately to catch them in the act and identify with complete certainty who is involved. The plan Oliver outlined was elegant in its simplicity, creating what appeared to be a security gap leading to dummy files that would look like the encryption protocols, but would actually be tracking beacons. Anyone who accessed them would be immediately identified, their actions logged in a separate secure system Oliver had built. When do you expect the actual attack to occur? Jeffrey asked, already reaching for his internal security line. Tonight, Oliver said confidently. The pattern has been escalating, and 3 critical security modules were temporarily disabled this morning. All indications point to a major attempt within the next 12 hours. Jeffrey called Marcus Wong, TechFusion's head of cybersecurity, and put him on speaker. Marcus, I need you in my office immediately. Bring only your senior technical lead. Tell no one else. Within 15 minutes, Marcus and his lead engineer were listening in astonishment as Oliver outlined the security vulnerability and his proposed countermeasure. To their credit, they focused on the information rather than questioning why a child was involved. The detection pattern is sophisticated, Marcus admitted, reviewing Oliver's data. We've been monitoring increased attempts, but hadn't connected these specific events. He looked at Oliver with newfound respect. Your honeypot strategy could work. We can have it operational within 2 hours. One more thing, Jeffrey added. No one outside this room can know about this. If there is an insider involved, we need to maintain absolute secrecy. As Marcus and his engineer left to implement Oliver's countermeasure, Jeffrey turned to the boy. "I need to call William. As a board member, he should be informed about a threat of this magnitude." Oliver tensed visibly at the mention of William's name. "Is that necessary? The more people who know, we can trust William," Jeffrey assured him. "And his technical expertise could be valuable here." After a moment's hesitation, Oliver nodded. "Okay." Since the day William had given Oliver his private email, Jeffrey had observed a subtle but significant change in their interaction. Though they maintained the pretense of a formal board member-child program participant relationship, William had attended every single session of the innovation program, often staying afterward to discuss Oliver's ideas in more detail. Oliver, for his part, had been sending William detailed product improvement suggestions nearly every day, each one meticulously researched and professionally presented. William had incorporated several of these ideas into actual development plans, though always careful to obscure their source from the wider organization. It was a strange, cautious dance, neither acknowledging the true nature of their relationship, yet both clearly seeking connection through the safe territory of technology and innovation. William arrived 30 minutes later, his face grave after Jeffrey's cryptic but urgent call. His expression registered brief surprise at seeing Oliver there before quickly masking it. "Oliver is the one who detected the security threat," Jeffrey explained after outlining the situation. "His analysis suggests we have less than 12 hours before the actual breach attempt." William turned to Oliver with newfound intensity. "Show me what you found." For the next hour, Oliver walked William through his discovery process and evidence, answering technical questions with remarkable precision. Jeffrey watched as William's initial professional interest transformed into genuine admiration. "Your pattern recognition abilities are extraordinary," William said finally, studying one particularly complex data visualization Oliver had created. "I've been working in technology for 30 years and wouldn't have connected these signals." Oliver's face remained composed, but Jeffrey could see the impact William's praise had on him. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." As evening approached, they relocated to the cybersecurity center where Marcus and his team had implemented Oliver's honeypot trap. The atmosphere was tense as they monitored the systems, waiting for any sign of the predicted attack. At 10:42 p.m., the first alert triggered. Someone had accessed the system using Elizabeth Jennings' credentials and was systematically navigating toward the planted fake files. "It's happening," Marcus confirmed, his fingers flying over his keyboard as he strengthened the monitoring. "They're taking the exact path Oliver predicted." William leaned closer to the screen, his expression hardening. "Can you confirm it's actually Elizabeth? Could someone be using her credentials?" "The access originated from her private office," Marcus reported, "and the behavioral biometrics match her typing patterns." Jeffrey felt a wave of disappointment. Elizabeth had been with TechFusion almost from the beginning. The betrayal cut deep. "Wait," Oliver said suddenly, pointing to another monitor. "There's a secondary access point. Someone else is connected to her system remotely." Marcus quickly verified. "He's right. Elizabeth's system is being controlled by another user. Tracing now." His expression grew confused. "It's coming from Robert Chen's home network?" Robert Chen was TechFusion's CTO and William's close friend for over 20 years. "That can't be right," William said sharply. "Robert wouldn't—" "The signature is clear," Marcus insisted, "and it matches other suspicious access patterns we've detected over the past month." The security team continued tracking the intrusion, documenting every move as the attackers, now confirmed to be Elizabeth and Robert working in tandem, attempted to extract the quantum encryption protocols. Thanks to Oliver's trap, they were accessing only decoy files while providing irrefutable evidence of their betrayal. "We should alert the FBI," Marcus suggested. "This is corporate espionage at the highest level." Jeffrey nodded grimly. "Make the call," We'll need to coordinate the arrests." As Marcus stepped away to contact authorities, William stood silent, his face showing the shock of betrayal. Robert had been best man at his wedding, godfather to his oldest daughter. "People can hide their true intentions very effectively," Oliver said quietly, seeming to sense William's distress, "even from those who think they know them well." William looked down at the boy, something shifting in his expression. "Yes," he agreed softly, "they can." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. FBI cybercrime specialists arrived, the evidence was secured, and plans were made to apprehend both Elizabeth and Robert. By 3 a.m., both had been taken into custody. Initial interrogation revealed they had been working for Nextech, TechFusion's main competitor, in exchange for significant financial compensation. As the crisis subsided and the security team began reinforcing their systems, Jeffrey found Oliver asleep in a chair in the corner of the command center, his small body finally surrendering to exhaustion after the intense day. William stood looking down at the sleeping child, his expression unreadable. "He saved the company," Jeffrey said quietly, joining him. "Again." William nodded, his eyes not leaving Oliver's face. "He did." After a long pause, he added, "I need to get him home. Ms. Sullivan must be frantic by now." "I called her hours ago," Jeffrey assured him, explained there was a corporate emergency and that Oliver was helping us. She was concerned but understood the situation was exceptional. William hesitated, then carefully lifted Oliver into his arms. The boy stirred slightly but didn't wake, his head instinctively nestling against William's shoulder. For a moment, William stood perfectly still, the unfamiliar weight of his son in his arms seeming to affect him profoundly. His typically guarded expression softened, revealing a complex mixture of emotion. "I'll take him home," William said, his voice strangely rough. "My driver's waiting downstairs." Jeffrey watched as William carried Oliver toward the elevator, the powerful CEO and the sleeping child forming a tableau that few would ever witness, but that changed something fundamental between them. As the elevator doors closed, Jeffrey thought about the journey that had begun with a 6-year-old sitting in his executive chair, claiming he could save the company. Oliver had done that twice now. But in the process, something even more significant was unfolding, the careful, cautious rebuilding of a connection that should never have been broken. The next morning, Jeffrey arrived early to handle the fallout from the security breach attempt. The board had been notified, interim replacements for Elizabeth and Robert were being arranged, and the FBI was continuing their investigation into how deep the corporate espionage network extended. He was surprised to find William already in his office, looking as though he hadn't slept. "I need to discuss something important with you," William said without preamble. "About Oliver?" Jeffrey gestured for him to continue, noting the unusual intensity in his friend's manner. "Last night, when I carried him to the car, he woke up briefly," William began. "He was disoriented, half asleep. He looked up at me and said, 'Show, Dad.'" William's voice caught slightly. Then he immediately corrected himself, apologized, and called me Mr. Hayes before falling back asleep. Jeffrey remained silent, allowing William to process the moment in his own way. "I couldn't drop him off after that," William continued. "I sent my driver to explain the situation to Ms. Sullivan and bring her to my penthouse. Oliver slept in my guest room, and Ms. Sullivan stayed to supervise. They left this morning before I departed." "That's a significant step," Jeffrey observed carefully. William nodded, his expression troubled yet resolute. "I've made a decision. I need to acknowledge him, not publicly yet, but to him directly. No more pretense of a purely professional relationship." "What changed?" Jeffrey asked. William was quiet for a long moment. "When I was carrying him last night, he felt so small, so vulnerable. Yet this same child had just saved a multi-billion-dollar company from disaster through sheer brilliance and determination." He looked up, meeting Jeffrey's eyes. He's done everything possible to prove his worth, while I've done nothing to earn his respect. That imbalance is unsustainable. Have you considered the complications? Rebecca, your daughters. Extensively, William confirmed. It won't be easy. Rebecca may never forgive me, though our marriage has been effectively over for years, maintained primarily for public appearance and family stability. He sighed heavily. My daughters are adults now. They'll be shocked, hurt, perhaps angry, but they deserve the truth. Jeffrey studied his friend carefully. And, Oliver, what exactly are you proposing? A gradual integration, beginning with private acknowledgement and regular contact. Eventually, a more formal arrangement regarding his education, his future. William's expression grew determined. I won't be a shadow in his life any longer. I can't undo the past 6 years, but I can influence the next 6 and beyond. He might reject you, Jeffrey warned. He's built significant emotional defenses. I know, William acknowledged. I would deserve his rejection, but he deserves the choice. As they discussed the practical details of William's plan, Jeffrey marveled at how fundamentally things had changed since that rainy morning when a precocious 6-year-old had sat in his chair and announced he was there to save the company. Oliver has his innovation session today, Jeffrey reminded William. Are you planning to speak with him then? William nodded. After the session, I've asked Ms. Sullivan to allow him to join me for dinner afterward. A hint of uncertainty crossed his face. Rare for a man usually so confident. Do you think he'll agree? There's only one way to find out, Jeffrey replied, but if I were to predict based on how carefully he studies everything about you, I think he's been waiting for this invitation his entire life. William rose to leave, pausing at the door. Thank you, Jeffrey, for forcing me to face this, for giving him a platform where his brilliance could be recognized, for seeing what needed to be done when I couldn't. As the door closed behind William, Jeffrey turned to look out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere in that urban landscape, a brilliant 6-year-old was probably already preparing for today's innovation session, unaware that his life was about to change dramatically. The path forward wouldn't be easy for any of them. There would be difficult conversations, painful revelations, complex adjustments, but something profound had begun to heal. A connection that should never have been severed was being cautiously, carefully restored. Sometimes, Jeffrey reflected, the most innovative solutions came from the most unexpected sources. A child had walked into his office to save a company and had ended up saving something far more important, a relationship that would shape both father and son for the rest of their lives. 6 months later, Jeffrey stood at the podium in TechFusion's main auditorium, addressing a packed audience of employees, industry analysts, and technology journalists. The excitement in the room was palpable as he prepared to unveil the product that would redefine the company's future. Today marks not just a new chapter for TechFusion, but a fundamental reimagining of how technology serves human needs, Jeffrey began, surveying the eager faces before him. 6 months ago, our company stood at a crossroads. Today, we stand at the forefront of innovation once again. On the front row, Oliver sat between William Hayes and Ms. Sullivan, his small legs swinging slightly as he watched the presentation with intense focus. He wore a miniature version of the same navy suit Jeffrey and William had chosen for the executive team, a symbolic acknowledgement of his contribution that made the boy's eyes light up when he first saw it. The journey to this moment had not been easy. William's decision to acknowledge Oliver had sent shockwaves through his personal and professional life. Rebecca Hayes had filed for divorce within weeks, leveraging the scandal for a substantial settlement, but ultimately agreeing to a private arrangement that kept the most personal details out of the press. William's daughters had reacted with initial shock and anger, but the older one had recently begun tentative communication with her half-brother. Professionally, William had stepped back from his most public-facing roles to focus on rebuilding his family relationships, including his evolving connection with Oliver. Their weekly dinners had become a sacred ritual, sometimes discussing technology and innovation, other times simply building the father-son relationship that had been denied for so many years. The Fusion X Nexus represents a complete departure from conventional thinking, Jeffrey continued, gesturing toward the sleek device displayed on the giant screen behind him. Its adaptive interface recognizes not just what users do, but anticipates what they need before they realize it themselves. The audience murmured appreciatively as Jeffrey demonstrated the groundbreaking features, many of which had originated from Oliver's initial suggestions, refined through months of collaborative development. The quantum encryption technology securing this device makes it the safest personal technology ever created, Jeffrey added, a subtle reference to the security breach they had narrowly avoided. Elizabeth Jennings and Robert Chen had both pleaded guilty to corporate espionage charges, their cooperation with authorities revealing a sophisticated industrial espionage network that had targeted multiple technology companies. As Jeffrey concluded his presentation to enthusiastic applause, he invited the executive team to join him on stage. William approached the podium next, his commanding presence drawing the room's attention. As head of the Future Technologies division, "I'm proud of what our team has accomplished," William began. "But innovation requires fresh perspectives, the ability to see possibilities where others see limitations." He paused, his eyes finding Oliver in the front row. Over the past months, William had gradually introduced Oliver to the wider TechFusion community as a gifted contributor to their educational initiatives. Though the full nature of their relationship remained private, their growing connection had become evident to those who worked closely with them. "The Fusion X Nexus would not exist without our Next Generation Innovators program," William continued. "These remarkable young minds have challenged our assumptions and expanded our vision of what's possible." He gestured to Oliver and the 3 other children from the program sitting in the front row. "Would our young innovators please stand and be recognized?" As the children stood to enthusiastic applause, Jeffrey saw the pride in Oliver's expression, not just for the recognition of his contributions, but for the public acknowledgement from his father. William's eyes held a similar pride as he watched his son accept the audience's appreciation with a composure remarkable for a child who had just turned 7. Following the presentation, the executive floor buzzed with celebration. Industry analysts were already predicting record-breaking sales for the new device, and TechFusion's stock had jumped 12 points by mid-afternoon. The transformation from a company on the brink of failure to an innovation leader once again had been nothing short of remarkable. Jeffrey found Oliver in the executive lounge, intently studying market reaction data on his tablet, while occasionally sipping from a juice box. Some things never changed. "Congratulations, Oliver," Jeffrey said, sitting beside him. "Today wouldn't have happened without you." Oliver looked up with a small smile. "Early customer feedback indicates 94% approval for the adaptive interface. That exceeds even our optimistic projections." "Always the analyst," Jeffrey laughed. "But how do you feel about it? This is your triumph, too." Oliver considered the question with characteristic seriousness. "I feel satisfied, and perhaps a little proud." He glanced across the room to where William was engaged in conversation with investors. "He introduced me to his daughters last weekend." "I know," Jeffrey said gently. "How did that go?" "Awkward at first," Oliver admitted. "Catherine, the older one, asked a lot of questions. Madison mostly observed." He paused. "But before they left, Catherine said I had his eyes, and she didn't say it like it was a bad thing." The simple observation carried profound meaning. Each small step toward family integration represented tremendous progress in Oliver's journey, from isolated prodigy to a child with genuine connections. "And how are things with William?" Jeffrey asked. A rare smile spread across Oliver's face. "We're going fishing next weekend. He says his father taught him when he was my age, and he wants to continue the tradition." The significance of this wasn't lost on either of them. William was explicitly acknowledging Oliver as part of his family lineage. Their conversation was interrupted as William joined them, resting a hand lightly on Oliver's shoulder, a gesture of affection that had gradually become natural between them. "The board is ecstatic," William reported. "They've unanimously approved the expansion of the Future Technologies Division, including a significant increase in funding for the Next Generation program." "That's excellent news," Jeffrey responded, noting how Oliver instinctively leaned slightly toward his father's touch, another small but significant sign of their evolving bond. William looked down at his son with unmistakable pride. "Oliver has already submitted proposals for the next 3 development cycles. The quantum neural interface concept is particularly promising. I've refined the initial design," Oliver added eagerly, pulling up detailed schematics on his tablet. "The technological barriers are significant, but not insurmountable with the right research focus." Jeffrey watched as father and son bent over the tablet, their identical expressions of concentration highlighting their unmistakable connection. Despite the formal language and technical focus, there was something profoundly intimate about their interaction. 2 brilliant minds perfectly attuned to each other, building something together after years of separation. As the celebration continued around them, Jeffrey reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun 6 months ago, when a determined child had walked into his office, claiming he could save a failing company. Oliver had delivered on that promise beyond anyone's expectations. But the true miracle wasn't the technological innovations or business transformation. The real miracle was happening right before his eyes. A father and son finding their way back to each other, building a relationship that should have existed from the beginning, but was now being carefully, intentionally constructed day by day. Later that evening, as the formal events concluded, Jeffrey observed Oliver and William leaving together, the boy's small hand hesitantly slipping into his father's as they walked toward the elevator. William's momentary surprise gave way to a gentle squeeze of acknowledgement, another first in their gradual journey toward normal father-son interactions. Ms. Sullivan approached Jeffrey, watching the pair with obvious emotion. "6 months ago, I would never have believed this possible," she said quietly. "Oliver has spent his whole life studying William from afar, desperate for even the smallest connection." "And now," Jeffrey prompted. She smiled. "Now he has a father who calls him every night before bedtime, who knows his favorite ice cream flavor, who is learning, sometimes awkwardly, how to be a parent to a child who is simultaneously 6 years old and intellectually 30. As the elevator doors closed on William and Oliver, Jeffrey felt a profound sense of fulfillment. TechFusion had been saved, its future more promising than ever. But more importantly, 2 lives had been fundamentally transformed. A brilliant, lonely boy had found the connection he desperately needed, and a successful but emotionally disconnected man had found redemption through acknowledging the son he had once denied. "Sometimes," Ms. Sullivan observed, seeming to read Jeffrey's thoughts, "the most important innovations have nothing to do with technology at all." Jeffrey nodded in agreement. The greatest breakthroughs often happen in the most unexpected ways. Thank you for watching this story until the end. If you enjoyed this emotional journey of connection and redemption, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What moment touched you the most? What other stories would you like to see next? Your support helps us continue bringing these meaningful narratives to life. The journey of Oliver and William reminds us that it's never too late to rebuild what's broken, to acknowledge our mistakes, and to open ourselves to the connections that truly matter. Sometimes, the most profound change begins with a single brave step, or in this case, with a determined 6-year-old walking into an office with the audacious claim, "I'm here to save your company."